I've always believed that evil rarely announces itself with a roar. More often, it comes dressed in authority, wrapped in rules, and smiling like it's doing you a favor. That's exactly how it walked into our lives wearing a tailored blazer, holding a clipboard like a weapon, and claiming to be here for the safety of the community. My wife, Sarah, and I had bought our lakeside cabin at Serenity Bay in Maple Falls, Washington 3 years earlier. It was our dream, after a decade of grinding city jobs, a place where the mornings smelled of cedar and coffee, and the evenings shimmered gold on the water. Here, we'd imagined growing old together, far away from the politics and noise of the world. That Tuesday evening had been perfect. Dinner plates still warm from roasted salmon, the faint hum of the dock swaying gently against its moorings, and Sarah's laughter drifting across the deck as the sun slid behind the evergreens. We were halfway through a bottle of Syra when the front door burst open without so much as a knock. She walked in like she owned the place. Mid-50s, perfectly styled auburn hair, manicured nails tapping against a leather clipboard. "Emergency inspection," she announced, her voice clipped and cold. "Your dock is in violation of community code. Immediate action is required." For a moment, I thought she was joking. "I'm sorry, who are you? And why are you in my house?" I asked, pushing my chair back so quickly my wine glass nearly toppled. "Claudia Mercer," she said, striding onto the deck like a general inspecting her troops. "President of the Serenity Bay Homeowners Association. I have emergency authority under HOA bylaw section 14. Her eyes swept over the dock, narrowing like a hawk sighting prey. "This structure could collapse at any moment. It's a lawsuit waiting to happen." I knew better. That dock had been installed by certified contractors and cleared by the county. There wasn't a damn thing wrong with it. But Claudia examined it as though she'd found a catastrophic flaw threatening the entire state of Washington. Before I could tell her exactly where she could shove her emergency authority, Sarah appeared at my side. She was calm. Too calm. She didn't bristle or shout. Instead, she tilted her head, smiled politely, and said, "Could I see the specific code violation and the inspector's report?" For the briefest moment, Claudia faltered. Her grip on the clipboard tightened. Her gaze flicked away, then back. "It's being filed tomorrow," she said finally. "The point is, you need to fix this immediately." Something in my gut turned to ice. This wasn't about safety, and as much as I wanted to throw her out, Sarah's hand brushed mine under the table, a silent signal I'd learned to trust. "Not yet. Play along." Claudia's expression shifted into something almost smug. "Of course, you'll need time to process this," she said, her voice softening into a mockery of concern. "But emergencies don't allow for drawn-out debates." Then she spread a stack of documents across our dining table, their official seals catching the last of the evening light. "Code violations require immediate seizure for community safety," she recited. "The HOA has full authority to confiscate unsafe properties. No compensation required. Public safety overrides private property rights." I actually laughed sharp, incredulous. "You're saying you can just take our home? Our $500,000 home?" Her smile thinned into a razor's edge. "Watch me." It wasn't until she left, her threats hanging in the air like the first rumble of a distant storm, that Sarah spoke again. She sat across from me, her eyes steady. "She's not just some overzealous HOA president," Sarah said quietly. "She's a predator, and predators make mistakes when they think they've already won." I didn't know then how right she was. I didn't know she'd already begun mapping the contours of a trap so precise it would make chess masters jealous. All I knew was that something dark had set its sights on our home, and my wife wasn't planning to run. She was planning to hunt. That night, after Claudia's heels clicked down the gravel path and the echo of her intrusion faded into the dark, Sarah didn't reach for a glass of wine or even her phone. She reached for her laptop. "I need to know who we're dealing with," she said, her tone all business now. The warmth in her eyes from earlier was gone, replaced with a focus I'd only seen a few times before, once when negotiating our cabin purchase, and once when she found out a contractor had overbilled us by $3,000. Both times, someone else ended up very, very sorry. I watched her fingers fly across the keys. Within minutes, she had a page of search results open, each one chipping away at the facade Claudia had paraded into our home. Here, Sarah said, swiveling the screen toward me. It was Claudia's smiling headshot on a real estate website from 5 years ago. Back then, she was a practicing property attorney in Spokane. Another search result told the rest of the story law license suspended 3 years earlier for ethical violations involving client property transfers. Translation: she'd been caught skimming homes out from under people who trusted her. My stomach nodded. She's done this before. Sarah nodded. And now she's HOA president in a community where she can use fake legal threats without anyone questioning her authority. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my temples. So what's the play? Blackmail? Buy us out cheap? Sarah's eyes stayed locked on the screen. Neither. She wants this cabin for free. And I think I know why. She clicked open another tab: local court filings. It didn't take long to find a name that kept popping up. Ethan Mercer. DUIs, petty theft, and a $180,000 civil judgment against him for gambling debts. She's desperate, Sarah said. If she can get this place without paying a dime, flip it for $700,000, she wipes Ethan's debt and walks away with a profit. No one's going to connect the dots because she'll wrap it in legal jargon and call it community safety. I stared at her, trying to process how fast she'd peeled back the layers. So she stages violations, declares the property unsafe, takes it, sells it, and we're just out? Sarah's mouth curved not into a smile, but into something sharper. That's the plan she thinks she's running. But if she's willing to fabricate violations, she'll commit other crimes to make them stick. Which means you can catch her. I finished, feeling a flicker of hope. Sarah's voice softened, but her eyes were hard steel. I can do more than catch her. I can make her think she's winning while she hands me every piece of evidence I need to put her away. I didn't doubt her, not after what I'd just seen, but part of me wondered if she understood what we were up against. Claudia had years of experience twisting laws to her advantage. People like that don't scare easily. You're not worried she'll see through it? I asked. That's the beauty of it, Sarah said. She already thinks I'm just a yoga instructor who does farmers markets on weekends. She sees you as the hot-headed husband, easy to provoke. She's not planning for the woman who used to run private investigations in Seattle. That was the moment I realized I didn't know my wife as completely as I thought. She'd mentioned investigation work before we married, but I'd pictured background checks and insurance fraud cases, not laying traps for predators with law degrees. Sarah closed the laptop with a quiet click. Tomorrow, we start playing our parts. You're going to get angry, I'm going to get scared, and Claudia's going to get careless. The way she said it, calm and certain, made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. From the deck, the lake shimmered under the moonlight still, peaceful, unaware that in the next few days it would become the backdrop for a high-stakes game of psychological chess. And somewhere out there, I imagined Claudia plotting her first move, not realizing she'd already stepped into Sarah's board. The next morning, Serenity Bay woke under a blanket of fog. The lake was so still it looked like glass, but Sarah's mind was already moving at the speed of a storm front. She stood by the window in a soft robe, phone pressed to her ear, voice pitched just loud enough to drift through the open window toward the street. Yes, I understand legal action takes time, she said, a tremor in her tone that I knew was pure theater. But what if we can't afford to fight? What if we just sell before it ruins us? She glanced at me over her shoulder, her eyes glinting with something between mischief and precision. I recognized it now, not panic, but calculation. Outside, a shadow moved past the hedge. Claudia. She was doing her casual morning walk, which just happened to take her within earshot of our living room. Her posture shifted ever so slightly, like a cat catching the scent of prey. Sarah's performance continued. I don't know, maybe a quick sale. Even if we lose money, it's better than a lawsuit. She ended the call with a shaky sigh, loud enough for Claudia to hear. We waited. Sure enough, Claudia slowed her pace, lingered by the mailbox, then moved on, probably already drafting her victory speech in her head. When the coast was clear, Sarah pulled out a storage box from under the couch. Inside was an assortment of tech equipment that looked like it belonged in a spy movie: small microphones, motion sensors, a cluster of black domes that turned out to be decoy cameras. Bait, she said simply, holding one of the decoys up to the light. She'll find these. thinks she's neutralized our surveillance, and feel free to do whatever she wants. The real cameras will stay hidden. She showed me the crown jewel, a tiny, high-definition lens embedded inside what looked like a perfectly ordinary smoke detector. Even I wouldn't have noticed it if she hadn't twisted it open to reveal the circuitry. That one watches the whole main floor, Sarah said, sliding it into place on the ceiling. And this, she tapped a device on the windowsill, is a directional microphone. Picks up conversation from up to 50 feet away, as long as the window's cracked. By midday, our cabin was wired tighter than a bank vault, though from the outside, it looked like a couple of amateurs had just slapped up a few cheap security cams from a hardware store. Exactly the illusion Sarah wanted. The psychological pressure campaign began that afternoon. Sarah hosted her weekly yoga class on the back deck, but this time she sprinkled in a new script. "I'm just so stressed," she told a student in a voice loud enough to carry over the water. "If we lose the cabin, I don't know what we'll do." Mark's panicking. I'm panicking. I don't think we can fight the HOA. I watched from the kitchen as a kayak drifted just close enough to hear. Claudia. She'd traded her clipboard for paddles, but the predatory attention was the same. That evening, as we sat with the deck lights casting a warm glow over the lake, Sarah's directional mic picked up the first payoff. "They're cracking," Claudia's voice carried across the water. "Sarah's ready to fold, and Mark's a wreck. A few more days, and the cabin is ours." I gripped the railing until my knuckles went white. "She really thinks she's winning." "That's exactly what we want," Sarah murmured. Over the next 2 days, she escalated. Fake legal documents accidentally left where Claudia could see through the window cost estimates for fighting an HOA lawsuit, even a notice of intent to sell with our address printed in bold. When Claudia lingered outside, Sarah would take calls on speakerphone. "I'm telling you, we can't afford this fight. We need to find a buyer before it gets worse." The transformation in Claudia was almost physical. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who believed the kill was inevitable. But Sarah was watching her just as closely. "She's testing boundaries," Sarah whispered one night as we reviewed the day's audio. "Hovering longer, getting bolder. Soon she'll feel comfortable enough to cross the legal line. That's when we start tightening the net." And then it happened. Through the mic, we caught her voice, low and conspiratorial, speaking to Ethan outside our hedge. "They're done. I can get in and make the damage look bad enough for emergency seizure. We move fast, they'll never know what hit them." I turned to Sarah, my pulse thundering. "That's conspiracy. That's just the beginning," she finished for me. As I lay awake that night, the fog over Serenity Bay seemed thicker than usual, curling around the cabin like it was holding its breath. Somewhere out there in the mist, Claudia was plotting her next move, convinced the board was hers to command. She didn't know she was already in check. The first time Claudia crossed the line, it was almost anticlimactic. No fireworks, no dramatic crash. Just the quiet click of our back door lock turning under her hand. It was 1:14 a.m. when Sarah's phone pinged with a motion alert. We were tucked away in a motel 2 miles down the highway, the one with the broken neon sign buzzing over the parking lot. Our cabin sat in darkness, looking abandoned, exactly as Sarah had planned. We watched on her tablet as Claudia stepped into the kitchen, a small flashlight cutting across the counters. She moved like she'd done this before because she had. "Look at her," Sarah whispered, eyes locked on the feed from the smoke detector cam. "She's hunting." Claudia started with the obvious. She scanned the corners, spotted the decoy cameras, and disabled each one with a quick snip of wire cutters. Her lips curved in satisfaction. "She thinks she's blindfolded us," Sarah murmured. From there, Claudia got to work. In the basement, she poured a gallon of water into the far corner, letting it pool along the foundation. On the deck, she loosened railings, muttering something about structural hazards. In the living room, she slid a screwdriver under electrical outlet plates, tugging wires loose until they dangled dangerously. Every move, every whispered word was caught in crisp detail. And then came the line that froze my blood. "Emergency seizure within 48 hours, she said to herself almost proudly. "Flip it fast, pay Ethan's debts, and walk away clean." Sarah didn't look at me, just adjusted the volume on the mic feed. We've got her admitting motive, method, and intent all in one night. But Sarah wasn't satisfied with one break-in. She wanted Claudia deeper in the trap. 2 days later, Sarah staged the next move. the fake county office. We rented a small unit downtown, dressed it with thrift store filing cabinets, a desk, and a freshly printed sign reading Maple County Emergency Property Services. Her friend Jason, ex-theater actor with a voice like warm gravel, played the role of county clerk. When Claudia walked in, she was carrying a leather portfolio like it was the Holy Grail. Inside were forged documents, an emergency seizure order, a public safety property transfer form, even a fake condemnation notice stamped with a counterfeit county seal. Jason played it perfectly, flipping through the pages with a bureaucrat's boredom. "So you're transferring ownership of a private residence to the Serenity Bay HOA," he said. Claudia didn't hesitate. "Unsafe dock. Foundation issues. Immediate risk to the community. Owners get nothing, it's all in the bylaws." "And the property value?" Jason asked. She didn't blink. $500,000. Becomes HOA asset for free. We can resell within a month. The hidden camera in the desk drawer caught every syllable. Jason slid a form across the desk. "There's a $4,500 processing fee for emergency transfers." Claudia reached for her checkbook without so much as a pause. "Whatever it takes. This is life or death for my son. Bribery clean, clear, undeniable." That night, as we reviewed the footage, Sarah leaned back in her chair, satisfied. "We've got breaking and entering, vandalism, conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery, and bribery. But we're not done." She was right. The next escalation came when the directional mics caught a late-night conversation between Claudia and Ethan outside their garage. "They've hired a private investigator," Claudia whispered. "If they connect the dots, we're finished. I need to finish this before they file anything." Ethan's voice shook. "Mom, maybe we should just stop. I can find another way. You think those loan sharks will wait? We burn the evidence, finalize the seizure, and it's over." "Burn the evidence." Sarah's eyes sharpened. "Now we know what her final move will be, and we'll be ready." Over the next week, Sarah planted the last breadcrumbs, fake legal notes on our coffee table about filing an injunction. A confidential investigator's report, conveniently left in plain sight during a staged yoga class, and a mock-up of our deed tucked halfway into an envelope marked County Records Division. Claudia couldn't resist. She started appearing outside our cabin more often, lingering after dark, her silhouette framed in the glow from our windows. The arrogance in her posture was unmistakable. She believed we were prey that had stopped running. But she didn't know that every time she lingered, every time she whispered to Ethan, every time she rehearsed her cover story, she was handing us the rope Sarah would use to tighten the noose. By the time we were done, Claudia wouldn't just lose her presidency. She'd lose everything, and she'd never see it coming. By the time Sarah decided it was time to spring the next phase, Claudia was already drunk on her own momentum. She had the confidence of a predator that had already bitten into flesh, certain the kill was inevitable. That's when Sarah decided to hand her a clock, loud, ticking, and entirely fake. It came in the form of a manila envelope, accidentally left sticking out of our front door one foggy Thursday morning. Inside was a printed federal warrant for search and seizure, complete with official-looking seals, case numbers, and the execution time. 6 a.m., 2 days from now. The document listed both our address and Claudia's home. Charges included conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery, and organized property theft. We made sure the window blinds were just loose enough for Claudia to catch sight of it when she came for her morning walk. We even left the door ajar, as if we'd forgotten to lock it. She took the bait instantly. By that afternoon, the directional mics picked up her voice on a call to Ethan, trembling with urgency. "They're coming for us in 48 hours, she hissed. "Federal raid. We have to destroy everything, every paper, every file before they knock on that door." Ethan's voice cracked. "Mom, how are we supposed to erase months of planning in 2 days?" "Not 2 days," Claudia shot back. "We start tonight." Sarah was almost serene as she listened to the recording. "Pressure makes criminals sloppy. She's about to trade her careful planning for speed, and that's when she'll trip over her own feet." The first night passed with Claudia pacing in her kitchen, making frantic calls to burner numbers we couldn't trace. But the second night was when the storm broke. It was 11:37 p.m., 6 hours and 23 minutes before the fake raid, when Sarah's phone lit up with a motion alert from the cabin. Claudia appeared in the feed, lugging 2 red gasoline cans and a canvas duffel that sagged with the weight of documents. 6 hours until they come, she muttered, checking her watch. Must burn it all before dawn. She didn't bother with the decoy cameras this time. She didn't even glance toward the ceiling where the smoke detector cam sat quietly watching. Her movements were frantic, jerky papers tossed into piles, drawers yanked open, furniture shoved aside. She's completely abandoned protocol. Sarah whispered beside me in the motel room. Perfect. Through the tiny lens, we watched her work like a woman possessed. She soaked our living room rug in gasoline, muttering about destroying evidence and locking in ownership before the raid. Every so often, she'd pause to shove a document into her jacket, our real deed among them, before splashing more fuel. At 5 hours and 12 minutes on her imaginary countdown, she stopped in the kitchen to light a match. Her hands were shaking so hard it almost snapped in half. That's when Sarah made the call. "Collins," she said into the phone, her voice crisp. "It's time." We hit the road with the police cruiser behind us, sirens silent until we crested the final hill toward Serenity Bay. The fog clung to the lake like a shroud, and through it, our cabin's silhouette glowed faintly from the light of Claudia's flashlight sweeping across the windows. At 4 hours and 13 minutes on her clock, our headlights hit her full in the face. She froze mid-strike, the lit match trembling in her fingers. The cruiser's red and blue lights exploded across the deck. Officer Collins burst through the front door before Claudia could move. "Drop it, now!" She spun toward him, face a mask of disbelief. How? How are you here before the raid?" Sarah stepped in behind Collins, her calm presence filling the room like a verdict. "There was never a raid, Claudia? That clock you've been racing against?" "Fake. Every word, every move you made tonight, it's all on camera." Claudia's eyes darted upward, finally catching sight of the smoke detector. Her face drained of color. "No!" Sarah's voice was almost gentle. "Yes." The officer read her rights while she stood there, surrounded by gasoline fumes, the duffel of stolen documents at her feet. Outside, the fog was beginning to lift, and with it, the illusion of control Claudia had clung to for weeks. The trap had closed, and she had walked into it on her own 2 feet, watch in hand, racing toward her own destruction. By the time Officer Collins had Claudia cuffed, the flashing red and blue lights had already stirred the entire shoreline awake. Serenity Bay was the kind of community where a dropped trash can lid, drew a curtain, twitched 3 police cars in the dead of night was practically a siren call. Doors opened. Porch lights flared. Neighbors began drifting toward our cabin in slippers and robes, the cold air filling with a low hum of speculation. "What's going on?" Mrs. Kravitz from 2 doors down whispered to her husband as they crossed the gravel. Officer Collins kept his voice level. "Claudia Mercer, you're under arrest for grand theft, breaking and entering, attempted arson, forgery, fraud, and vandalism." The words hit the crowd like a ripple through still water. Someone gasped. A man muttered, "You're kidding." But then eyes turned toward the gasoline cans on our deck, the duffel bag gaping open to reveal bundles of papers, and the disbelief began to dissolve into something sharper. Sarah stepped forward not as the panicked homeowner Claudia had imagined, but as the architect of her downfall. Her tone was calm, precise, and it carried over the murmurs of the growing crowd. Since Claudia's been HOA president, she's been abusing her position to target properties she wants. She staged violations, created fake legal documents, and tried to steal our home to pay off her son's gambling debt. Murmurs swelled into open outrage. "She was saving my life," Claudia snapped, twisting against the cuffs to look at Ethan, who had just arrived, pale and wide-eyed. "Tell them, Ethan. This was for you." But Ethan didn't move toward her. Instead, he looked at the crowd, then at Officer Collins. "I never asked her to steal anything. I'll deal with my own mess. I'm not part of this." The air shifted, pity gone, replaced by the heavy weight of betrayal. Sarah reached into her bag and pulled out a tablet. "You should all see this." She tapped the screen, and the first video began to play. Claudia slipping through our back door during the first break-in, flashlight beams slicing through the dark. The crowd watched as she loosened deck railings, poured water into the basement corner, and muttered about emergency seizures and flipping the cabin for profit. Gasps. Sharp inhales. Mrs. Kravitz put a hand over her mouth. The next clip rolled, the hidden camera in the fake county office. Claudia handing over forged seizure documents, boasting about a $500,000 property for free, writing a check to process the theft. That's fraud, someone shouted. By the third clip, tonight's footage from the smoke detector cam, Claudia dousing our living room in gasoline, any lingering doubt evaporated. The crowd's shock was now pure anger. How long has she been doing this? A man demanded. Long enough, another answered darkly. She used HOA funds like her personal account, Sarah added. We'll be turning over financial evidence to the county auditor tomorrow. Claudia's voice cut through, shrill and cracking. You set me up. You manipulated me. Sarah didn't flinch. I gave you every opportunity to choose a legal solution. You chose crime. Repeatedly. The words landed like a gavel strike. Officer Collins nodded toward the patrol car. Time to go. As he guided Claudia toward it, Mrs. Kravitz's voice rose above the rest. All in favor of removing Claudia Mercer as HOA president, say aye. The response was immediate and unanimous. Aye. And in favor of appointing Sarah Williams as interim president until elections? Aye. Again, unanimous. Sarah's eyes softened for the first time that night, but her voice stayed steady. Then my first act will be ordering a full HOA audit and putting safeguards in place so no one in this community can ever be terrorized like this again. The cheer that followed wasn't loud, it was resolute. A sound that said the tide had turned. Claudia, now seated in the back of the cruiser, twisted to look at Sarah through the open door. You think you've won? She spat. Sarah met her gaze without blinking. No, Claudia. Justice won. The door shut, the lock clicked, and the cruiser rolled away into the night. By dawn, word of what had happened spread far beyond Serenity Bay. But in that moment, standing on our deck surrounded by neighbors who now knew the truth, the air felt different, lighter, like the fog had finally lifted for good. Claudia's trial began 3 months later in the Maple County Courthouse, a red brick building that looked more like a library than the stage for her downfall. The community showed up in force, packing the gallery until even the standing room was shoulder to shoulder. Some came out of curiosity, others for closure, but all of us wanted to see this through to the end. The prosecution wasted no time laying out the case. They had hours of video footage, Claudia breaking into our cabin twice, damaging property to stage safety hazards, handing over forged seizure documents at the fake county office, and finally, pouring gasoline on our floors while muttering about paying off Ethan's debts. Each clip played on the overhead monitor like a highlight reel of arrogance. Jurors leaned forward, their faces hardening as they watched her slip deeper into crime with every scene. Her defense attorney tried to spin it as desperate acts of a mother protecting her son from dangerous people. But that argument collapsed under cross-examination when the prosecutor asked the simple question, does desperation harass a criminal intent? The judge, a stern man with a silver mustache, listened patiently through it all. On the final day, he read the verdict with deliberate gravity. On the charge of grand theft, guilty. On the charge of breaking and entering, guilty. On the charge of attempted arson, guilty. On the charge of forgery, guilty. On the charge of fraud, guilty. On the charge of vandalism, guilty. The list seemed endless, but each guilty landed like the toll of a bell. Claudia stared straight ahead, her expression locked somewhere between disbelief and rage. Then came sentencing. This was not a crime of passion, the judge said. It was a calculated, predatory scheme designed to steal from an innocent family and endanger lives. The defendant showed no remorse, even when confronted with overwhelming evidence. The court sees no basis for leniency. He sentenced her to 10 years in state prison for the state charges grand theft, arson, and break-ins served consecutively, not concurrently. That meant no shaving down the time. She would serve the full term. And just when the gavel was about to fall, the federal prosecutor stood. Your Honor, the defendant is also facing federal charges for mail fraud relating to the forged documents she sent through the U.S. Postal Service. That added 2 more years to her sentence. 12 years in total. The restitution order was next. $60,000 to cover property damage, arson cleanup, legal fees, and what the court called emotional distress damages. She was also permanently banned from holding any HOA position anywhere in the state. When the bailiffs led her away, her parting shot was a muttered, "Sarah set me up." But the words fell flat in the packed courtroom, drowned out by the murmurs of relief. Ethan had taken a plea deal early on, cooperating fully with investigators in exchange for immunity. He sold his truck, moved out of state, and enrolled in debt counseling. The last I heard, he was working construction in Oregon, far from the lake in the shadow of his mother's crimes. Back in Serenity Bay, the HOA board wasted no time holding an emergency vote. Sarah was unanimously elected president, her first act being to initiate a full audit of the association's finances. The results were as ugly as we'd suspected. Claudia had siphoned off more than $15,000 in community funds over 2 years' travel expenses, restaurant bills, even spa treatments, all disguised as administrative costs. The board filed a separate civil suit to recover the money. Under Sarah's leadership, the rules changed fast. Any HOA enforcement action now required 3 board member signatures and documented proof from an independent inspector. Mediation became mandatory before legal threats. Transparency reports went out quarterly. The effect on the community was immediate. Neighbors who'd barely spoken before began stopping by to talk on the dock. Kids played without parents worrying about arbitrary fines, and the constant hum of fear that had lingered under Claudia's reign was gone. The local news picked up the story, running the headline, "HOA, President's 12-year sentence sends shockwaves through Washington Lake community." It went viral within days, picked up by national outlets as a case study in HOA, abuse, and how to fight it. And, ironically, the media attention boosted the value of our cabin. Real estate agents called it the famous Serenity Bay house, the place where a corrupt HOA leader met her match. One evening, sitting on our deck with the water reflecting the first blush of sunset, I asked Sarah if she ever doubted the plan would work. "Of course," she said, sipping her tea. "But I knew one thing for sure. If we stayed silent, we'd lose everything. And if we pushed back smart, we'd win more than just our home. We'd win our community back." She was right. Claudia's cell door might have closed miles away. But here at Serenity Bay, the real sentence was freedom, the freedom to live without fear, knowing the bully was gone and the rules had changed for good. A year after the night Claudia Mercer was driven away in the back of a police cruiser, Serenity Bay felt like a different world. The fog still rolled across the lake in the mornings, the cedar still perfumed the air, but something intangible had shifted. The undercurrent of tension that used to ripple through every neighborhood meeting was gone, replaced by a quiet confidence in one another. It started with small things. The Williams Dock, once the excuse for Claudia's fabricated crusade, became the gathering spot for Saturday morning coffee. Neighbors who used to keep their curtains drawn now lingered by the water, swapping fishing tips and sharing fresh muffins. Kids played tag on the shoreline without parents worrying about HOA safety violations. Sarah, in her role as HOA president, kept her promises. The first quarterly transparency report was a neat binder anyone could flip through: expenses, receipts, decisions, all laid out in plain view. The second report came with a community barbecue on the green, paid for with legitimate budget surplus, not siphoned funds. People stopped seeing the HOA as a shadowy overseer and started seeing it as, well, theirs. On the anniversary of Claudia's arrest, the community decided, half joking at first, to mark the date as Claudia Free Day. It stuck. That first year, we strung up a long white banner across the lake that read, "United We Stand," and every house chipped in for a potluck. Mrs. Kravitz baked a cake shaped like a jail cell, complete with licorice bars. Someone brought a piñata painted to look like a clipboard. Laughter rolled over the water, the kind that comes only after surviving something ugly together. Local news sent a crew to cover the event, interviewing neighbors about how the community had changed. One man put it best: "We realize rules are only as good as the people enforcing them. And we decided, we're the people now." Sarah gave a short speech that day. She didn't gloat, didn't even mention Claudia by name. She spoke about vigilance, about choosing legal solutions over shortcuts, and about the courage it takes to stand together when someone tries to divide you. A community, she said, isn't just houses on the same street. It's the line you hold together when someone tries to cross it. The crowd's applause was steady, not explosive, a shared understanding rather than a burst of celebration. Later that night, after the lanterns were lit and the last boat had drifted back to shore, Sarah and I sat on the deck with 2 glasses of champagne. The lake reflected the stars in scattered constellations. "Do you ever think about her?" I asked quietly. Sarah didn't pretend not to know who I meant. "Sometimes," she admitted. "Not because I doubt what we did, but because I wonder if she's learned anything." I thought about the trial, the sentencing, the interviews where Claudia insisted she'd been set up. I doubted prison had softened her. "Some people," I said, "never see themselves as the villain." Sarah's gaze stayed on the water. "Then that's their prison, long after the cell door closes." In the months that followed, the ripples of our story reached farther than Serenity Bay. We got emails from homeowners across the country thanking us for showing it was possible to fight and win against corrupt HOA boards. A legal reform group cited our case in testimony before the state legislature, pushing for oversight measures that eventually passed into law. Even now, when strangers recognize us from the news and ask about the famous cabin story, I feel that mix of pride and disbelief. Pride, because we stood our ground. Disbelief, because it all started with one woman thinking she could walk into our home and take it. The cabin's value has risen far beyond what we paid. But we're not selling. It's not just a house now, it's a symbol. A reminder that our sanctuary isn't just built from cedar and stone, but from every choice we made to defend it. One crisp October morning, a new neighbor asked me what it felt like to live in the house that beat the HOA. I looked across the lake, where the mist was lifting to reveal the dock, solid and unbroken, and I told her the truth. It feels like we own more than the property. We own the story, and nobody can take that away. That's what justice looked like in Serenity Bay, not just a verdict or a sentence, but a community reshaped. The unity forged in those tense weeks became its own defense system, stronger than any bylaw or locked gate. Claudia's name faded from daily conversation, replaced by talk of fishing tournaments, holiday boat parades, and whose turn it was to host poker night. Life moved on, as it always does. But every year, when the date rolls around, we gather by the water, raise a glass, and remember. Not to celebrate her downfall, to celebrate what we became without her. And as the laughter carries across the lake under strings of warm light, I realize that Serenity Bay finally lives up to its name. The story of Serenity Bay was never just about a corrupt HOA president trying to steal a cabin. At its core, it was about power, manipulation, and the choices people make when desperation meets opportunity. Claudia Mercer believed she could hide behind titles, fake authority, and legal jargon to take what wasn't hers. She underestimated 2 things: the intelligence of her targets and the unity of a community once it knows the truth. The most striking lesson here is that predators often rely on silence and isolation. Claudia's strategy worked in the past because her victims felt alone, intimidated, and powerless against an official-sounding threat. In our case, the turning point came the moment Sarah refused to respond with fear. Instead, she answered manipulation with strategy, intimidation with evidence, and secrecy with transparency. The second lesson is about the psychology of arrogance. Claudia's downfall wasn't just the result of surveillance cameras or legal traps. It was her own belief that she was smarter than everyone else. That arrogance blinded her to the possibility that she was being watched, recorded, and outplayed at every step. It's a reminder that those who exploit others often plant the seeds of their own undoing. The third and perhaps most important lesson is that justice isn't only about punishment, it's about prevention. Sarah didn't just remove Claudia from power. She restructured the HOA so no one could abuse it again. Lasting change came not from revenge, but from building safeguards that would protect the community long after the drama faded. This story also underscores the value of calm under pressure. Panic fuels the plans of manipulators. Composure dismantles them. Sarah's ability to stay focused allowed her to think several moves ahead, turning Claudia's aggression into opportunities for evidence gathering. Finally, Serenity Bay reminds us that unity is the most powerful defense against corruption. Once the community saw the truth, they acted as one, removing Claudia, demanding accountability, and rebuilding trust. What began as a personal fight to save one cabin ended as a shared victory that reshaped the neighborhood's identity. In the end, the message is simple. When confronted by those who seek to take from you through fear, respond with truth, strategy, and solidarity. Give them enough space to reveal their character, and they'll hand you the rope that ties their own fate.